Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the first decan of Pisces. Hope that you're having a wonderful afternoon out there. We're going to be breaking down all of the details with the new moon. We're going to be kind of taking it through its first quarter and then taking a little bit of a look at its full moon phase. So I hope that you'll stick around for that. We've got a few announcements before we get started here. Of course, if you are interested in a reading, you can go over to spencermichaud.com. I do all these breakdowns here every Friday or so around 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern time. But I also do work with clients. So if you're interested in seeing how these aspects are going to be affecting you personally, go over to spencermichaud.com, click on the Book Now button, and you can schedule a reading. I also have a beautiful partner named Tanya Andrews, who I'm going to be doing a new webinar with called Dignity and Devotion. We're going to be taking a look at Mars through the lens of mythology, astrology, dignity, and crafting a magical practice. So we've done 4 of these so far, I think. I think we've gone through the moon, Mercury, Venus, and the sun, and we are starting on the superior planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The next one in our series is going to be Saturday, April 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern time, so I hope that you'll join us for that. It's been a lot of fun working with her, and I hope we're packing a lot of useful information into those. So go check that out. You can find that at the Book Now button under the classes section in my website. Of course, Third Coast Mojo has all of your magical needs, and the aforementioned beautiful Tanya Andrews has some really cool stuff that she's been sharing with the world. She has a brand new Sun in Leo oil and working that she's been putting out into the world. It's really good stuff. I wear it almost daily to lift my spirits and bring a little sunshine into your life or into my life. So I hope that you will take advantage of that. Check her out on Etsy at Third Coast Mojo. You can also sign up for the newsletter if you want a 10% discount on any reading moving forward. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that. We have a lot of people who signed up for that and then kind of signed up for a reading and were able to get a nice little bonus with that. So hope that you'll take advantage of that opportunity, and I would love to work with you. And then finally, if you want to support the channel and the work that I'm doing here today, you can buy a super chat or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. This is a great way to support the channel and a great way to help me keep the lights on here. So I hope that you'll support via that. Okay, friends, we are going to be working through the new moon in Pisces. Sorry, I got a doorbell rung here. I think maybe there's a package or something like that, but it'll have to wait. So we're going to be breaking down the new moon in Pisces, and we are going to be checking out all the details associated with it. We're talking about the decans. We're going to be talking about this giant Pisces stellium that we have working through here. This is a pretty interesting new moon as far as challenging our assumptions, challenging our personal mythologies, the way that we might be crafting our inner narratives that lead to external situations that we craft or co-create with the universe. And this is an excellent way to start to take some stock before the Mercury and the Venus retrograde periods that are coming up in March, just to start taking a look at how our belief systems might shape our reality. So we could start breaking this down piece by piece. So this is going to be a new moon at 9 degrees of Pisces on the 27th of February. And I'll bring up the chart here. So here is our chart, 9 degrees of Pisces. And you can see here we've got this giant stack up in Pisces. You know, you've got the sun, the moon, Saturn, Mercury, the North Node, and Neptune all hanging out in the sign of the fish. It is going to be hosted by Jupiter here. So here's Jupiter hosting all of this stuff, trying to provide resources. There's a mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter. That's pretty interesting. Jupiter is able to witness this new moon, which is generally positive. It is in a square relationship, so there might be some challenges, especially feeling like we have too many things that we want to do, too many thoughts, too many stories, too much information to work through. I think that a lot of us have been feeling fatigue with that. The challenge of trying to parse through everything that's happening at a breakneck pace, at an accelerated speed. Lots of changes happening, especially in America right now. So we're trying to parse all of those things out. Hold on. I will. We've got the sirens in the background, giving us some oracular messages sometimes when we definitely see, when we talk about what could be something challenging. I always think that there's oftentimes we'll get the police sirens going by, or the fire station sirens. Yeah, there's a lot happening right now. We're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to separate fact from fiction. We're trying to figure out what this means for us personally, and for our neighbors and our communities and our friends and our family, and for our country. It can be overwhelming, and I think the Jupiter in Gemini expands what we might be exploring, what we might be trying to take in. Gemini to me is a pollination sign. It's where you've got the bees that are visiting all sorts of different flowers, collecting little bits and pieces, and trying to bring it back to the hive to create something unified out of that. That's actually one of the things that we don't necessarily talk about enough with Gemini, is that, yes, it does split our attention in a lot of different directions, but eventually it shifts to Cancer, which is trying to bring something new into the world, trying to birth something, trying to unify all of those things, make choices so that we can birth something new. Now, Pisces as a sign, a little bit different than the Gemini Jupiter there, right? Little bit of a mismatch on some level. That's why we have the square. Pisces is again a sign that tries to unify beliefs into a coherent whole. It is also a dissolving type of sign, something where we might be dissolving the cold frozenness of winter and thawing out for spring, but that tends to blend things together. So instead of separating things out into categories, naming them, rationally thinking about them, they're all mixed up in this emotional soup on some level. So we might be feeling the emotional soup. Part of that may be because of all the information, of all the thoughts that we have. So how do we balance and become more centered again between the head and the heart, right? Sometimes when the head rules and we aren't getting in touch with our own inner knowledge, when we are overly attached to external reality, that can be very disorientating. That can be very destabilizing. And it doesn't mean that we completely ignore external reality. It means that we just have to, I think, pace ourselves with it and figure out how to integrate that into our own life and experience, etc. So I think that we are, this next month ahead, March, lots of retrogrades, lots of void of course moons, lots of opportunities to make new starts, but with the caveat that those starts are going to be slow and or delayed. This new moon is going to set off a whole series of events that may feel like things are accelerating in motion because of the movement into Aries. But then we've got all these switches of direction. So I would say that be very careful about being too rash about your decisions. Think things through, see how it shapes through the bigger picture of your life, the greater story that you're trying to tell. We're going to spend some time with that today, the ability to shape our realities through our belief. We'll talk a little bit about some things in pop culture like the Matrix, etc. And I think one of the things that is important when we're talking about Pisces and about crafting personal narratives through belief is a lot of our beliefs come through assumptions. And when we make too many assumptions, sometimes there's a larger disconnect between our lived reality and what we believe it to be. And that bridge is something we're going to have to try to traverse, maybe close that gap, etc., through our curiosity. And this is one of the, I think, the better parts of Gemini is curiosity. And with Jupiter hosting this new moon, is how do we get curious and actually start to parse out some of the fact from the fiction? How do we start to filter out the noise from what is truly important? So I'm going to check in with our chat because we've got some people stopping in here. Tracy's here, says, hey, Spencer, looking forward to your words of wisdom for this new moon coming up, arriving from Sussex in the UK. Nice to see you, Tracy. Thank you for joining us here from across the pond. Hope you're having a wonderful evening over there. Creating Harmony, how you doing, friend? Hi, Spencer, hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing well, my friend. I believe that's my friend. Khadija? Is that you, Khadija? Well, I hope that you're doing well. Taku is here. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you, Taku. I believe Taku is joining us from Germany, so thank you for stopping in. I always love to see our international friends here. We have Karen stopping in. Kia oro, Spencer. Nice to see you, Karen. Hope you're doing well. Hope that you're having a good... I have no idea what time it is in New Zealand, but it's probably the opposite of the time that we're experiencing here. So I hope that it's a wonderful experience, however, whatever time it is by you. All right. Parth Sharma is here. How you doing, Parth? Parth is asking about predicting their daughter's future. Well, Parth, today we're going to be talking about the new moon in Pisces, and we're going to be doing sort of a reading for the general public. So if you want to have a personalized reading for yourself or for your daughter, you can go over to spencermichaud.com, click on the Book Now button, and sign up for a reading. But welcome, friend. Hope that you're doing well over there in India. Okay, so those are some of my big picture thoughts about the new moon. Just checking back in here. I'm going to go over some of the details here. We've talked a little bit about the host, Jupiter at 12 degrees of Gemini. The second decan of Gemini is interesting because some of the challenges with that are being able to reconcile opposites. You know, this very much shows us the division between one side or another in high contrast. It's a Mars ruled decan, so it's difficult to unify those pieces. I'm pretty familiar with this territory as I have Venus in this decan, so I tend to enjoy attempting to unify ambiguous opposites in my life or in my communities. It's in the 11th house, so I feel like I do that here on this channel a little bit. That's at least a goal of the channel, is to try to see things from a number of different perspectives and see if we can find some common ground. So that's another thing to consider with this particular lunation. The new moon is going to be trine Mars. So here we have Mars in Cancer. So here is Mars at 17 degrees of Cancer, newly direct, okay, when the new moon happens. It is still retrograde as we are recording this, but over the weekend it's going to station direct. There will be a malefic enclosure of Mercury for a few days from Sunday till early on Tuesday, so keep your eyes peeled for that. That could be a little bit of a tough period, but it's temporary, so I hope that you all will hang in there for that. But this trine here, we may have some ideas about how we want to move forward with our life, especially with Mars stationing direct. We may have been doing a lot of review of our support systems, of the things that bring us a sense of security and peace. And now we might be ready to take action to help preserve those things or protect them. We also have this huge stellium here in Pisces that we alluded to earlier. Again, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, North Node, all co-present with the new moon. Saturn is under the beams, and Mercury will be emerging as an evening star over the course of this lunation cycle, very close to this new moon. When a planet's under the beams, it is going into a cycle of renewal. It's in a place where it is not visible. So it's sort of going behind the scenes, going into this kind of furnace type experience and into the heart of the sun, where we're burning away all of the old experiences, all of the old structures to be reborn as something new. And when Saturn does this, it can feel really destabilizing because often Saturn, some of the agreements that we make with Saturn are social. So Saturn helps us with the blueprint that helps keep society together and functioning. And when Saturn goes under the beams, sometimes it feels like the structures that we count on for our everyday lives seem to be disintegrating, but it is going through a process of renewal, and we will have Saturn Cazimi shortly after this new moon in Pisces. Now, Mercury emerging as an evening star is interesting because Mercury will have been going under the beams of the sun before this lunation. And when it emerges, we often get messages that are very important. Now, the challenge is that Mercury is in a tough spot for it from traditional dignity. Generally, Mercury is a planet that likes clear communication, likes to separate things into categories. When we have the sign of Pisces, we're generally blending information together. We're working with figurative language rather than with literalness. So it's great for art, it's great for poetry, it's great for imagination. It's not so great for linear thinking, for more rational thinking. So we may have some messages that emerge around the new moon that may be irrational, that maybe they're very artistic if you want to think in a positive way, but there could be more about the sacrifices that we may have to make to help support a belief system that we have. That's part of the challenges of the Decan 3 of Pisces, where Mercury is going to be emerging as an evening star. So I think, again, the key word for today is don't make assumptions. And we'll talk about the 4 agreements a little bit today in depth as we go along. But I think that this is really important as we move forward. Is a lot of times in the recent past, the information that we've been getting has been manipulated through an algorithm, manipulated through unreliable narrators, manipulated through voices that are sometimes trying to twist that information to their own personal agendas. And it can be really confusing to figure out what is up and what is down. So I think that this is a great period of time to get clarity and not take rash actions based on those assumptions. Because if we do that, especially with Venus in Aries, Mercury shortly moving into Aries, we may take a rash action that we may regret later, that we'll have to backtrack off of because of the retrograde motion of Mercury and Venus coming up in the month ahead. Now, the first aspect that we have is a conjunction with Mercury. So this is doubling down on all of the things we've been talking about with Mercury and Pisces conjoining the North Node of all things. So an increase of some of this confusion potentially. I was reading a story today about potential dismantling of the United States Postal Service, which feels like a very mercurial organization. So we may have difficulty with our messages being delivered, our packages being delivered. Mercury was a planet of the courier, so having difficulty with that potentially. Just a lot of things going on, a lot of changes to our structures of our reality and the assumptions that we have made, a lot of us, about how society works. Basically, the way that a society functions is a set of agreements. Not necessarily the 4 agreements. I wish it was the 4 agreements because I think that society would be much kinder if we practiced the 4 agreements as the way that we structured our societies. But it's a set of assumptions as far as how things are supposed to work. And when those things get turned upside down, a lot of the things that we take for granted, we sort of have to reconsider. So this is the process that we're going through here on some level. Khadija says, yes, it's me. Glad to make it to alive, especially with the new moon in my 7th house conjoining my Saturn. Oh my goodness, Saturn return for you, Khadija. Well, I hope that you and your partnerships are thriving and flourishing at this point. Wishing you all the harmony in the world with all of that. Kim's Astro Healing is here. How you doing, Kim? Just hopped on. Hola from Spain. Hola, my friend. That's awesome. I'm glad that you're joining us here from Spain. I love all my European friends, my Canadian friends. I hope that you will, in Europe and in Canada, forgive some of us Americans for some of the blustery hot air that's been coming out of this country recently. I just want to say that not everybody feels that way as far as the noise and rhetoric that's coming from our leadership. There's a lot of us here in this country that would love nothing more than peace with our neighbors and peace with this world, and for sharing and moving past greed and anger and othering. So I'm just so grateful that you all continue to join me, and hopefully we'll figure this out together. KP, how you doing, Karen? Hi, Spencer, and all. Glad to be able to join alive, trying to keep the anxiety down and the spirits up. This moon is in my 4th. I hear you, Karen. That has been, I think, one of my main challenges over the last few weeks, or I guess goals, is how do we remain calm while there's a lot of anxiety producing things. And Jupiter and Gemini is expanding all of those things, expanding all of the information that we have to process. Like, I'll give you a few tips as far as what I've been trying to do. First of all, I have this ashwagandha tea that I've been drinking that is supposed to help you with stress management. I used to drink mate before I did these live streams, which is sort of a focus, concentration, caffeine boost. And I just had to stop doing that because I get too amped up with just everything going on. So like if I'm speaking slower, or if the thoughts come a little bit slower, I think it's intentional. I've been trying to slow down the delivery from my brain to my mouth, and be able to center myself through that. I also think having some timeouts from the internet are really important. I think it's important to stay informed, but I think it's also important to keep your own house clean, I guess I would say, literally and figuratively. My beautiful daughter reached out to me yesterday, and she was struggling with a lot of similar challenges, and she was asking me for my spiritual advice. We talked about the Pisces and things of that nature, but we also just talked about, like, how do you, when you feel out of control, when we feel out of control, when we feel like things are spiraling out of control, whether it's through the news or in our own lives, how do we start to regain a feeling that we are co-creating with the divine? And I think it starts very small. Think about as within, so without, as above, so below. And my advice to her and to all of you and to myself is, if things are out of control in your grander sphere, how can you start to restore some order, even just in a small area, just like a drawer of your house, one desk, just something where you're feeling like you're taking back some of your time, control, energy, etc. And I know it's small, and I know it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel like we're solving the bigger issue at this point, but it's a good start, and it's a good way to start centering yourself. I'm feeling like the first step in my centering journey is going to be some purging in my home, just so that I feel a sense of like decluttering. Because if you declutter your space, I think it helps you declutter your mind. And take breaks again from the news. I've been reading a lot lately. I've been reading The Lord of the Rings for our book club, and a lot of supplementary material. There's some really great insights and realizations in that book, especially about disappointment over evil arising in our time periods. There's a very famous line in the first 2 chapters where Frodo is saying, you know, I wish this hadn't happened in my time. Like when he's talking about the burden of carrying the ring, and Gandalf is like, so do everyone who lived to see such times, and you can only do with the time, decide what to do with the time that you're given. I know I butchered that quote, but that's the general idea. So sometimes we have to come to terms with the times that we're in and then decide what we're going to do moving forward. But I think a good start is getting our own houses in order, cleansing our own minds, getting back to center so that we can take action that's based on clarity. Khadijah says, by the way, I haven't complimented your deckan work in a while. It's so useful to my astro understanding. Oh, thanks, Khadijah. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's just, I am in debt to people like Susie Chang and Austin Coppock and folks of that nature for doing some really great groundbreaking work on that. I hope I'm just continuing their research and being able to utilize some of their wonderful insights and maybe bring just maybe a slightly different perspective to it. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. And for those of you who want to learn more about the decans, I have a whole series for sale in the store on my website. I did all 36 decans in the form of 12 webinars, so you can find that over there. Stephen is here. It says, good day and greetings from sunny San Francisco. How you doing, Stephen? Nice to see you, friend. Hope that you're doing well over there on the West Coast. Paintings by Mare is stopping in. Says, listening while painting in my studio here in snowy Maine. Oh, nice, Mare. I love that. I love that, that we can spend some time together, and hopefully this is inspiring. And yeah, it's nice to be able to connect in that level. So thank you for spending your afternoon with me. Kim says, I'm an American living in Spain. I'm very forgiving. Oh, thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. I'm a little bit envious of your situation in Spain right now. It seems like it would be a beautiful place to live, and hopefully we'll get things sorted out here in America. Seek Raj is here. What's up, Raj? How you doing, my friend? Says, thank you for your reassurance about the events in the USA. Yeah, Raj. Raj is a good friend of mine, and over there in the UK, and there's a lot going on here, bud. Just a lot going on. So we're just trying to make sense of it and take one day at a time. I think that's the best that we can do, and we'll try to help unpack it through the language of astrology and see where that might be able to bring us some reassurance. Yeah, Steven says, same here, Karen, trying to stay calm, right? Yeah, I think a lot of us are. Sergey says, staying calm is very difficult for me. Originally from Ukraine, Trump is trying to extort the country's resources in exchange for empty promises. Sergey, you are spot on. And I sometimes get a loss for words trying to parse out all of this stuff. I sometimes feel overwhelmed with sadness. It's so unnecessary, I think, what's happening right now. The rhetoric that is possibly leading to just unchecked greed and aggression, and people being treated as foes when they're actually friends. Yeah, it's really tough. It's tough. So I feel for you, Sergey, and I wish for peace for you and any family that you may have over in the Ukraine. And I guess I hope that we can have faith that not everyone believes as 47 does. Like, that's not, I think a lot of us here are starting to, well, not starting, but I think understand that rhetoric is dangerous and is very toxic, and it isn't how many of us believe. So I hopefully sending peace your way, friend, and for your friends and family over in the Ukraine. But yes, this is something that we are definitely seeing happen with Mars out of bounds. So much greed. There's so much unchecked greed right now, and America is basically being stripped for parts and sold off to the highest bidder. And the people that have taken over our government are utilizing its vast wealth and power to intimidate others into cooperation and into extortion. So it is ugly. It's sad. It's anger-inducing. It's all of those things. A lot of these wild swings of emotion are happening, I think, and it can all happen over the course of a 24-hour period with every new headline. I'm living through it with all of you. You know, I think that trying to choose my words carefully, because I know that a lot of these topics are very sensitive for a lot of different people, and I wish I could tell everyone that it was all going to be okay and provide comfort, but I don't know. And there are some things that we will have to live into the answers with as well. I take on a lot of people's feelings and emotions. I feel it deeply as an empathetic person. And the collective is in so much pain and fear right now and anxiety that it's a lot to process. Stephen says this moon will be transiting my 4th conjunct Venus and square my natal moon in Sagittarius and rising in Sagittarius. Well, this is going to be an interesting one for your home, potentially, Stephen, and for your roots. Khadija says partnerships are under review and restructuring for sure, but it feels like Saturn is trying to lead me somewhere constructive for my good if I can follow Saturn's lead. I think that's a healthy perspective. I think that anytime we have Saturn moving through a particular house, we see the results of previous actions. We sometimes we see endings, but sometimes we just see consequences. And consequences don't necessarily have to be bad. If we've been doing good work, sometimes Saturn can bring celebrations. But I think it does definitely bring us a sober reality check one way or the other. And sometimes that sober reality is good, and sometimes it shows us things that we need to make changes with. Remember, Saturn's a planet of nemesis, which can increase that which is lacking and decrease that which is excessive. So think about that in regards of bringing something back into balance. Karen says it's 7:30 a.m. now in New Zealand, and I'm preparing weaving materials for a class starting at 10 today. Oh, that's awesome, Karen. Karen does Maori basket weaving in New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken, trying to keep that sacred ancient art alive, which I think is extraordinarily admirable, and just really cheering you on for keeping those indigenous traditions alive. And yeah, great work, friend. All right. Yeah, Tracy says a lot going on in the UK for sure. This is a worldwide thing, friends, and it's not just America, although America is very noisy right now because of the nature of our leadership. But the rise of authoritarianism has been happening in a lot of different places, and it can be a real mind bender to figure out what to do in those circumstances, because it feels so big sometimes. Tarya's here, says, I wonder how crazy it will be in March. Well, moi, Tanya. Tarya, excuse me. Looks very much like Tanya, my partner's name. Tarya is joining us from Finland. I think March I just did the astrology of March last week, and it is one of the kind of the wilder months that I've seen in a while. Both retrogrades of Mercury and Venus in Aries, 4 Hellenistic void of course moons, which the Hellenistic void of course moon says that nothing will come of the matter. So a lot of periods where we might feel some inclination to get started, but things might not work out the way that we had hoped, or etc. That's also probably true for people who are in leadership positions. We could see a lot of crazy stuff in March where we think something's happening, but nothing may come of it. So it could work both ways as far as it being challenging, but also maybe potentially good for resisting the rise of technocratic fascism and the kleptocracy. Yes, Khadija says, I definitely think I need to follow your lead with expressing my thoughts slowly and more thoughtfully. The pace of this live stream is soothing. Appreciate that, Khadija. It takes a lot of consideration. This is why you'll hear me pause sometimes, because I try to consider the impact of my words for not just myself, but for as many of our people in our audience. And that's a tough thing to do sometimes, like to think about how it might affect many people. But I do think it's necessary. I think that there's no rush. I don't think there's anywhere we have to be right now, but right here with each other. And even if just the benefit that people are gaining from tuning in is slowing down their lives a little bit, I will have felt good about the time that we had here today. Steven's got a birthday coming up. Well, happy early birthday, Steven. Kim says the new moon will be conjunct my moon and Chiron in the 8th. Oh my goodness. Well, that's you've got a beautiful Pisces moon then, right, in the first decan. So let's break that down for you, Kim. Let's talk about Pisces I a little bit more. So we will unfold this over the next few days in a minute, but I want to start out by just giving you a little bit more of insight into Pisces I. So here we have the decan, the 10-degree section that is associated with the 8 of Cups, and it is a Saturn-ruled face or decan in a Jupiter-ruled sign. So Jupiter generally is associated with creating honor, merit, sometimes expansion, sometimes bringing things together to achieve a unified whole or goal. It is also a planet of liberation, especially when we consider Zeus, okay, liberating his siblings, Zeus, aka Jupiter, liberating his siblings from Saturn's belly, right? Saturn or Kronos consumed all of those Olympian siblings of Zeus, and Zeus had to go and kind of purge all of those out from Saturn's grip. But this is the Saturn face in this Jupiter-ruled sign, so it has a little bit of a Saturnian flavor to it. This decan, I think, Austin Coppock calls it the labyrinth. Book T, the Lord of Abandoned Success. The Book of Thoth, the Lord of Indolence. This decan, to me, very much feels like the 9th house energy. And 9th house energy is one where we're trying to find meaning before we take an action out in the world. It is a cadent house, which means it's falling away from an angle while simultaneously looking back and aspiring to be in that angle. There's these two different motions, primary and secondary, in the zodiac that feel like a planet is being carried in one direction, but it is also aspiring to move in a different direction. So I think that this is an important consideration when we're looking at how to delineate planets. But the 9th house is that action, or the quest for meaning before we take action. Now, you can also consider any cadent house that is near an angle, house 1, 10, 7, and 4, as pulling away from that angle by primary motion. So here we see in the 8 of Cups, someone being pulled away from 8 cups of material success, okay? Abandoned success, that Book of T calls it. We are leaving behind something. We have this Saturnian feeling of discontent, or being over it, or understanding that we are coming to an ending potentially, right? I think that we're finally leaving behind the world of ideas that we saw in Aquarius, the ideas that shape our societies. We're leaving a situation and going back and trying to return home. This decan is the initiation to a return to your center. And here today, we've been talking a lot about how do we return to peace? How do we return to a place of centeredness and release some of the anxiety that we feel? A lot of the anxiety that you can see, the Deccan Aquarius 3 is one of unstable effort, right? It's a lunar Deccan in a Saturn-ruled sign. So that one can feel very destabilizing sometimes. But here is a return back to centeredness. Now, that brings in the name that Austin Coppock gives it, the labyrinth. So we may be going and abandoning our external realities, sometimes for just simple survival. Sometimes when things get so heavy and when they get so challenging, we have to pull back into ourselves and into our inner wisdom and into our inner knowing and connect with something that is eternal. Think about it like this. We have to come back and connect with the hub of the wheel. If those of you who are familiar with the tarot, you've seen the Wheel of Fortune, which is a planet a card that's associated with the planet Jupiter. And sometimes as the wheel spins, you're on the top of the wheel. Things are good. You have resources, you have friends, family, etc. Things are good. But the wheel keeps spinning. And sometimes not sometimes, we age, relationships come and relationships go. Sometimes we have losses. Sometimes we feel like we're on the bottom of the Wheel of Fortune. And when we if we overly identify with these transitory things, that's when we start to feel completely destabilized. But when we reconnect with the hub of the wheel, that can help us connect with what is eternal. And I think Pisces is the beginning of that journey to reconnect with what is eternal. So beginning an inner journey, surrendering to our emotions. We've had a very emotional couple live streams lately. I'm an emotional person. Like I try to keep a good lid on my emotions for the most part. I think that, having a Taurus moon helps to stabilize my feelings, but I'll tell you, they sometimes they just I get so full, and I used to get that out through my music a lot, which didn't necessarily require rational thought. That's what's beautiful about it, is that it can just come out in waves of noises and sounds. And maybe that's what we need right now. Maybe we need to express ourselves in noises and sounds rather than trying to create a coherent thought. So the return to center is important, though, because we may be desiring to reconnect with our soul's purpose. And this is one of the things I really love about Austin's book, and is he talks about confronting our narrative loops and understanding the mythic structure of life. I've talked a lot about the mycelial networks that I consider our reality a part of. I like the metaphor of our experiences on this material plane being very much like the fruiting body of the mushroom that is connected to a mycelial spiritual network. And that's very similar to Indra's net, if you're familiar with that metaphor. Or you can also think about it as the matrix, I guess. I love the matrix for Pisces symbolism. And Pisces I is where we're kind of waking up a little bit from what we thought was our reality. Think about Neo in the Matrix, Keanu Reeves, sitting in his cubicle like every day, just kind of over it. He's going through the motions. He sees an opportunity, the white rabbit, to follow something that is calling him into a different reality. Pisces I is calling us through our siren song to a greater awareness of what is real. Okay? Maybe that includes a spiritual reality that we can't always see. That's what's important with Pisces. Virgo helps us to identify the things that are right in front of our face. Pisces helps us connect with things that we can't necessarily see. That's why figurative language is a representation of something else, right? It's naming something and comparing it to something else. If we say something literally, we say, this is a rock, right? Because that's what it is. That's what we've named it. It is the thing that it says it is. But if we say this is a slice of ocean, like, right? It's not literally a slice of ocean. It's a blue rock, okay? But we're comparing it to another thing and then finding the collisions between that. So these narrative loops that we have, that we're confronting, this is where we talk about our assumptions. I've said on this channel before as well that a lot of our belief systems are created when we were younger, and we accumulate experiences. So to me, the way a belief works, first of all, we can inherent beliefs from family, society, friends, etc. We also craft beliefs by having an experience, trying to make sense of it, and then predict what might happen based on our experiences into the future. Sometimes when we have traumatic experiences as a young person or into our adulthood, we create beliefs that we're going to have those negative experiences moving forward. And that gets us sometimes in a loop that sometimes can perpetuate the thing that we are afraid of. If we believe that we will be lonely, like that we were abandoned, okay? Like if this is one narrative loop I had to confront as a young person, was my mom took off when I was about 3.5 or 4 for a couple years. So I had to confront the narrative loop that every person that you care about will eventually abandon you. And that was a narrative loop that informed the types of actions that I would take that would perpetuate that story. Like if you never believe that someone is trustworthy, you will either hang on too tightly or you will never commit to that relationship. And then you are creating the exact thing that you are trying to avoid. So oftentimes what we have to do is we have to start telling a new story. We have to utilize the ability to say, I've never lived this day before. I've never had this particular experience. And this is important too when we're talking about the bigger picture of astrology. A lot of astrologers and historians are comparing this time to the American Civil War and the rise of fascism in the 30s in Germany. The fact of the matter is we've never lived this moment before. We may see echoes of that, but it is not a guarantee that that is the direction that all of this is going to go in. And part of it is through how we, as a community, start to tell a new story and co-create together a shared dream. So questions you could ask yourself during this period of time, this new moon. What siren song is calling to you? Where are you feeling over something? Where are you feeling like you want to leave something behind and go off and to find a sense of returning home, right? Austin Coppock talks about returning home, like Odysseus trying to return home from the Trojan War back to his beautiful family. He gets distracted. He goes on little side quests here and there, but he still has that pull back to center, back to home. So what is your siren song? Where are you being called to right now? What material form have you outgrown? What story have you outgrown about yourself? Okay? Those are the hardest things to change. A material change is much easier than changing an internal belief, in my opinion, because those things are hardwired into our neural pathways and connections. But it is possible. They have proven that we have neuroplasticity well into our old age if we work at it. It does take work sometimes. So where will this inner journey take you? Where can you return back to center? And do you have a lifeline as you go on that journey? Do you have Ariadne's thread? Ariadne being the princess that helped Theseus get to the middle of the maze of the Minotaur by holding on to one end of a string while he took it through the maze of, I believe, Daedalus was the crafter of the maze, where people would get lost trying to find this creature and slay it. But he was able to find his way back out because of this lifeline that he had. This reminds me of Stranger Things, if you're familiar with that. The young lady Max, who goes into the Upside Down but has this lifeline of music that helps her come back to the land of the living, right? Come out of this experience potentially. You know, I had a series of stories a few years ago when that was out. I was like, share with me your favorite song. What's your lifeline? What is something that brings you back to a place of peace and centeredness? And you know, and I got some really nice suggestions. For me, I think my lifeline song, if I was in the Upside Down, would be Enjoy the Silence by Depeche Mode. I think that's the song that I just never get tired of. I could just be listening to that, and I always am feeling a connection with it, you know. So what are those lifelines for you in this period that could feel like we're entering the Upside Down? You know, getting sucked into Vecna's, you know, spider web, I guess you could say. Where is that for you that helps keep you centered and keeps you sane? What truths are being revealed through these internal wanderings? It takes a lot of courage sometimes to examine our assumptions, our preconceived notions. It takes a lot of humility to do so. It takes a lot of dissolving of ego. It's easy to do what we've always done. It's easy to believe a story of victimization. And this is not just to blame the victim. There are many reasons we craft these narratives moving forward. Some of them are based on real trauma. But if we utilize the same tactics for different things, sometimes we're using the wrong tool. I think that's the thing that I try to ask myself, is this the right tool for this? Even if it's an emotional or social tool, is this the right tool for this job? Okay. The people pleaser, right? For example, trying to be a people pleaser to woo people's approval and try to chameleon or change your mask so that you could fit in when you're younger may not be the right tool when you come into your own, and that is no longer necessary. You know, this is something that I've been working on myself as a person who had a lot of different environments that he grew up in. I was constantly trying to play the peacemaker, emotional stabilizer. And I've even turned it into a job. We're doing it here today. Like, you know, it's putting that to good use, I guess, on some level, at least I hope. But there are certain situations where that's not appropriate, where I don't need to completely change who I am or the delivery of my message just so that someone is more comfortable. I've been trying to be a little bit more direct about expressing my feelings about those things because I don't feel like I need to make fascists or Nazis comfortable or white supremacists comfortable. Those people don't deserve to feel comfortable. So I think that these are the situations that we have to work through with our narratives. Okay, what repetitive story is shaping your reality? I think we've talked about that. We get into these loops. We get lost in the maze of our own inner story, and sometimes it's just a story. There are lots of spiritual practitioners that talk about speaking things into existence. And sometimes that feels awkward at first, where you're trying to speak through, say, you know, I am abundant. I am worthy of love. I mean, how many of you have actually just sat and looked in the mirror and said, I'm good enough? That's hard to do sometimes. But if you practice that, you know, you start to create a new belief. You start to create a new connection. So which of those stories are you, which of those inner critics are you continually patterning through? And these are true about the things that we take on as a society. One of the narrative loops that's circling right now is that it's everyone else's fault, right? That we need to find a scapegoat, that there is an enormous amount of othering going on socially that says, well, if only we just got rid of this faction of people, everything would be fine. That's a strange, repetitive narrative loop to be attached to. And it's shaping a lot of our reality right now. So how do we escape from that and take back the narrative? Is your personal mythology creating a prison or a palace? That's an important one. Sometimes our beliefs are very supportive. I have a belief from my childhood. You know, I'd shared a negative belief that in my early adulthood, I had to struggle through feeling of being abandoned by a parent and having to be a people pleaser because of all the different new situations I found myself in. But a positive belief that I brought from my childhood is I had a pretty positive male role model in my life. Like I had a father that kind of stepped up. Like I went to go live with him when I was about 4.5 years old. And he raised me by himself for a number of years and was very sensitive and was very kind. So I've internalized that masculinity is gentle and kind through the experiences of my own father. So there are positive things that you can bring into your life, okay? He's very consistent. He was always there. He's always been there. He's a Taurus rising. It was his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Dad. He's always been there. Whenever I needed him. And that's a beautiful thing to internalize. Consistency, loyalty, gentleness, kindness. So when you're examining and going into your own inner maze, find the jewels too. You don't just have to root out the negative conditioning. You can find the jewels, and you can find the positive role models and experiences in your life too. I hope most of you have at least one of those. I think if you think hard enough, you wouldn't have gotten to this point without some help along the way. This is something that I think that we take for granted quite a bit. We really focus on the demons. We really focus on the people that hurt us. But we don't take enough time to acknowledge the people that helped us. If you're still living today, you had somebody help you, because, and I'm sure that someone's going to argue, I didn't have any help. I just did it all myself. No, it doesn't work that way. We're all connected, and to get to this point in your life, you had to have some help and assistance. And even just identifying like a kind stranger, a kind neighbor, etc., that's a good start, So this is another thing where we don't make assumptions, right? So really examine if your belief system is keeping you a prisoner, or if there are some good things that you can glean from it. All right, I'm going to check back in with our beautiful chat here. Let's see here. Steven says the Pisces energy is feeling heavy and spiritual. Yeah, I mean, there's really no filter to it, it's just it's boundaryless, and I think that can lead to some swings, some joyful expressions, some sad expressions, some angry expressions. I mean, it's all in there. Seek Raj says, I'm a big fan of you and your work, mate. I love how you're always honest, thoughtful, and reflective. Oh, I appreciate that, Raj. Yeah, Raj does great work too. He's an excellent spiritual practitioner, and I always enjoy our conversations. So thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. Tarya says, I had my solar return today. Wow, Scorpio year started with Mars stationing. Well, happy solar return, Tarya. I hope that the year treats you well. This is a very interesting moment in astrology, and I think that there's some good things, there's some challenging things, and yeah, the Mars stationing part is really fascinating, right? I think it could be a good year for reflection. Maybe it's not necessarily one for moving too quickly, but just kind of taking stock. I think that's a good way to utilize a stationing Mars potentially. All right. Kim says, my Chiron is 10 degrees, so it's Saturn, Decan, Moon is 12 degrees, so Jupiter, Decan, and Jupiter's house. Well, that's pretty fortunate, Kim. That's a really nice Decan in Pisces. It's very, very Jupiterian. Um, some of the distance and gap that we feel in Pisces 1 between our desired reality and the reality that we're living, the dissatisfaction, some of that gap starts to close in Decan 2. So Jupiter acts as a bridge between our dream and our reality. So it's something that you might be able to bring into. You have, like, you're living in beautiful Spain right now. That was probably started as a vision, then were able to make it a reality. So it's very powerful. Starting with a vision is really powerful. I had a vision the other day that I wanted to put a greenhouse in my backyard, and it just started as an idea. And then I started researching it. I was like, oh, you know what? This isn't as hard as it might have seemed. And now it's much closer to becoming a reality. So I think that it always starts with a vision, right? Steven says, I thought last season of Stranger Things was the last one. A new one will start this year. Yeah, this is going to be the last season of Stranger Things. I think they're going to tie it all up and with a bow. I like Stranger Things. I like the nostalgia of it. It's intense. I don't have a super strong stomach for horror or gore, so it's a little bit on the edge. It's probably about as much as I can handle, but I like it. It's a good show. It's well written. Acting is good. Story is good. I will probably be watching the last season. Creating Harmony says, Starfish and Coffee by Prince is definitely my lifeline song. It always grounds and makes me feel at least a little happiness. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I love when we can identify those little things that can keep us grounded and centered, for sure. Okay, Tracy says, interesting what you say about the boundary lists of Pisces. I'm finding it hard not to go into the soup and get overwhelmed in the collective. This decan is trine my Cancer sun and trine Neptune in Scorpio. Yeah, Tracy, you and me both. Cancer is being ruled by the moon. The moon is a planet that is very tuned into collective feelings. It was a planet in traditional astrology that represented the masses. I have the moon on the midheaven, so I'm feeling all these things very much on an angle. I have the moon on a fixed star called Menkar, which is the mouth of Cetus the whale, the constellation the whale. And it was said to be very close to the feeling of channeling collective thought, feeling, etc. I think the way that I've had to work through that, Tracy, is, and I'm not saying that this is for everyone, but I'm fairly reclusive. I am somewhat of a hermit. I have my shell, my safe space, and I try to participate through these, live streams and through my work as an astrologer and online, etc., and with my neighbors and things of that nature. But it's easy to get overwhelmed with people's energy and whatnot. And again, I'm not saying that that's for everyone, but for me to be able to hear the voice of, I think, my own inner self or spirit, I need a lot of solitude. And this is partly probably 12th house sun and Mercury type of thing too. But again, some of those things are narrative loops that I may be considering as I move forward, like Everybody has them, and everybody can do an audit of them every once in a while. But I hear you about the boundarylessness. Figuring out what feelings are yours and what are other people's is difficult sometimes, especially if we have a lot of water placements. I do think being okay with silence and being okay with solitude, even if it's just temporarily, can really help us to parse those things out. And that is becoming harder and harder to come by because we have these devices in our pockets that tap us into the collective noise 24/7 if we want it. I would implore you all to just put your phones away every once in a while. I don't think that you should just get rid of it. I mean, we live in a world that is related to the internet. We are sharing this experience via the interwebs right now. But I do think taking scheduled breaks and saying, I'm going to put this away for an hour. If you just start with that, you'd be amazed at how much the sediment settles. You know, log out of Facebook or Meta or wherever for a day and see how your mental health starts to shift. It's pretty remarkable. I've gone so far as to, I will set timers to read, and I will put my phone somewhere that I can't even reach it, so that I read and I go into that space that is not cluttered with noise. I go for walks. I've been listening to audiobooks as I go for walks. I will read The Lord of the Rings and then I will listen to the audiobook. I'm just been really diving deep into that as part of my research for my class. And that's been really helpful to stay at least somewhat centered. It's hard to avoid. Sometimes with these social media apps, we are communicating with friends through them. We're actually being social. But I've even started doing this. There are some people that I only communicate through, like Instagram or Facebook or whatever. I will start covering up my feed with my hand only to see if there's a message that I need to respond to, which is sad that that's the thing, because I don't want to get sucked into some other new crisis. I want to be able to engage with those news stories consciously. And please don't mistake me for saying that we should just check out completely, because we do have to be aware, especially even if it's not for yourself, but for people who are less fortunate or in more dire circumstances. But I do think it can be healthy to engage with it intentionally on a more intermittent basis, or a scheduled basis even. Khadija says, I relate, Kim. Astro is my Virgo Chiron, exactly opposite this new moon. We'll get through this, hopefully wiser than before. I hope so, friend. Okay, so those are some of my thoughts on Pisces II. Let's take this opportunity. Let's take a little stretch break before we kind of unfold this here. Let's go back to here, and we will take this out. Take a little stretch. All right. While we're stretching, do me a favor. If you could go over and like the video, that would do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. We go live generally on Friday afternoons, 1 or 2 p.m. Eastern time. Sometimes I will adjust the time of the live stream for a more fortuitous chart. We have started getting into the time period where the live streams start with Mars in Cancer in the first house, which is not actually a great election, but we'll have to see if we want to continue on with that time or not. This is just a good time for me because my brain is still working, and I feel like it's a happy medium for our international friends, our European friends. It's not too late for them. We've got people from Australia and New Zealand that are stopping in, and we get to talk to them at the beginning of their day. So we'll see. It's hard to find something that works for everyone, though. And that's why it's recorded, so that if you can't make it, you can always listen later on. So thank you for that, friends. And of course, if you want to support the work that I'm doing, you can buy a super chat or a super sticker. That's always a great way to support the channel as well. All right, let's go back to it. So if we go back to our chart, you can see here that we are looking at the new moon, but we are also getting to the point where we have our first aspect conjoining Mercury. So we've talked about that a little bit in the beginning. And we've talked about that being an omen that is speaking very loud. But that omen, that planet, is in a very tough spot, probably very close to its, I would say, a place that it is just very much does not enjoy being. It's close to the maximum degree of exaltation of Venus. And in traditional astrology, Venus and Mercury were sort of, they didn't necessarily get along as far as being complementary, because Venus wants to harmonize and Mercury wants to split things up and cast doubt and create things into different categories. So it's possible that we could get some messaging that is related to Venusian significations. But I would say just be very careful about the messaging that you receive when Mercury emerges from the beams and the moon is making its first aspect, because we do have the North Node and Neptune. And the Neptune influence tends to, well, I would say that the North Node tends to expand things and increase, and Neptune being there may cloud our judgment. So if we have a large, cloudy message that comes to us, a good thing to do is to ask questions. And we'll talk about how to do that in a second. All right. Oh, Dawn is here. Hey, Dawn. Hi, everyone. It's been a while. So glad to catch you live for once. Nice to see you, Dawn. I believe Dawn's joining us from Alabama. Hope you're doing well, Dawn, and that life is treating you well. Steven's asking, Juno conjunct natal Neptune. Thoughts on this transit in the first house? Well, Juno, I won't take too long on this, Stephen, because we got to get back to the new moon. But Juno being an asteroid that is related to partnership, Juno, of course, is another way of describing the goddess Hera, who was known as the wife of Zeus. So I think that sometimes partnerships may be idealistic or idealized, or maybe even dissolved with the conjunction with Neptune. And through the first house, I mean, this is something where maybe a relationship is coming to you, or you are dissolving your sense of self through a relationship, and that's something to consider as well. But yeah, those are I don't work with Juno a ton, but just thinking about Hera as a partner, and that asteroid being related to partnership and commitment. Sometimes Neptune is a planet that dissolves those things, so it could even have a solvent quality on relationships. Tom is here. What's up? Namaste, Tom. How you doing? Tom's joining us from sunny and or cloudy San Francisco. Okay, so back to our chart. We're looking at the first aspect, which is conjoining Mercury on the 28th. And then as we move forward with the chart, okay, we'll take it through a few days and just start to preview some of that stuff that's going to be happening in March. So here is March 1st, and we have Mercury conjoining the North Node and Neptune. And then we have Venus stationing retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries. So again, the confusion, the non-linearness that comes through Mercury in Pisces is going to be increased by its conjunction with the North Node and with Neptune. So I do encourage all of you to not necessarily take everything that you hear at face value for the next few weeks or months or years, etc. I mean, for a number of reasons. That doesn't mean that we should completely erode our ability to have faith in the truth of anything. This is the danger. And one of the techniques of authoritarianism is they will erode trust in institutions to the point where nobody trusts anything, and it's much easier for them to dismantle people's freedom. So I think that there's a balance. Like, I know I've never been a fan of conspiracy theories or theorists. I guess I could say that as well. Because I feel like what it does is it takes a small kernel of truth and it just like completely blows it out of proportion. And I'm not really a fan of that. To me, that's sensationalism. Now, I will say the things that we're going through right now are worthy of your attention and not necessarily conspiracy theories. There's real challenges happening right now that need to be paid attention to. But I will say that questioning every single truth that you or messaging that you are receiving, that could lead to a breakdown of a different sort. And that's really a danger that we have moving forward, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence. Is the time is coming, if it is not here already, where it will be very, very difficult to discern whether a video that you see on the internet is real or not. And that's something that we haven't experienced necessarily before as human beings. Generally, what we saw with our eyes, we could somewhat trust. Somewhat. Now, there's definitely situations where that's not true, but it was hard to fake something. Now it's very easy. So how do we reckon with that? How do we reconcile that as human beings so that we can create a consensus reality, a shared reality? Because we have to have some kind of consensus reality to have a functioning society. I don't have a good answer for you right now. I don't have a great answer for that. But I think that there's a balance between healthy skepticism of things that you hear, but also if you are having something from a reliable source, not necessarily needing to question every single tiny thing to erode trust in any type of institution. You know, this is the thing that's happening right now, is things are being dismantled so quickly that this is the playbook that happens in authoritarian regimes. They will dismantle things so that they are so dysfunctional that it erodes any trust in any type of government, so that they can dismantle it without anybody protesting and then put in their own agenda. And you know, this is I don't even have great like reflections about that, other than that it's very nefarious, and we'll have to figure out how to counteract that type of thinking. So Mercury conjoining the North Node, Venus stationing retrograde in Aries too. So Venus is in her exile in Aries, and it's a Mars-ruled house. So this is a place where Mars tends to be slightly impulsive, where Mars is thinking a little bit more subjectively or from almost a more self-centered perspective. And the second decan of Aries is sort of about royal decrees. It's a solar decan. It's got the sun's maximum degree of exaltation at 19 degrees of Aries. And it basically is a place where we say, this is who I am and what I believe. And with Venus there might be an attraction to stating our case, stating our belief system, stating our perspective. But when Venus is stationing retrograde, we may be reviewing what we truly believe, who we truly identify as, right? When things are in such flux, the roles that we played within society shift very quickly, or may need to shift very quickly. When you're dealing with unprecedented events, you may be called to do something in a way that is very different than you've done it in the past. And that's okay. That's called surviving or adjusting, you know, adapting. there will be a need for that as we move forward. Yeah, no problem, Stephen. Yeah, asteroids are interesting. Demetra George is a really good source for that. She has a book called Asteroid Goddess that I would highly recommend, Stephen, if you're really into asteroids. It's a great place to start. Dawn says, for sure, I'm pretty sure the caterpillar thinks catastrophic events are happening, and they are for it, but the butterfly is also a beautiful revelation. That's a great point, Dawn. And we may be in the cocooning phase right now. One of the interesting things about butterflies and caterpillars is that their bodies just completely dissolve and turn into that cocoon. And we may be in that very disorientating, dissolving phase, but we may not know exactly where this is all going. We are trying to predict via astrology, via what has happened in the past when like Neptune's been in Aries, Saturn's been in Aries, etc. But we've never lived this moment. And again, and this is hard to do, friends. I am not immune to the negative catastrophizing types of doom spiral. But I do try to remember just the length of time that this planet has been around and how short these lives are and how short even just recent human history is in the grand scheme of things. And going out and taking a walk in nature and seeing a tree that's 150 years old. In our neighborhood, we actually have trees that are probably about 300 years old. We have a couple 300-year-old oak trees in our neighborhood. And just connecting with that energy sometimes is very helpful. Like seeing that, this too shall pass. And we can't always predict exactly what the impetus will be. There are many that will argue, and some of them correctly, that the system that we had before, when it was, somewhat, functional, was not fair and needed to be dismantled. And they would be right on some level, right? I think that yeah, I don't know how to contextualize that without I'm not a political analyst, so I'm not going to dive too deeply into those waters today. But I do think that the point being is that maybe the things that are happening, we don't completely know exactly where it is taking us. And I'm not a fan of the direction it is heading necessarily, but there may be a counter movement and a counterbalance to the things that are happening right now that may help bring us to a better place. I guess that's what I will hope for. Don says, praying for that. Better things are coming. Big hugs, everyone. Yeah, we need it. Ground and pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Ground and pray. I agree. And that's something that I've tried to learn over the course of my life, but it's not easy to identify what you can and can't change sometimes. That can be very confusing, but we'll live into the answers. All right, so we've got the Mercury conjoining the North Node, Venus stationing retrograde on the 1st. Mercury is then going to conjoin Neptune, and the Sun will square Jupiter on the 2nd. Okay, I'm going to go through these kind of quickly. I did a deep dive on a lot of these during the Astrology of March, so I don't want to spend too much time here. If you want a deeper dive, you can go check out that previous live stream. But again, this is probably going to be a time where we're feeling like a lotness, like with the Sun squaring Jupiter. This is an aspect that can inflate egos, so we want to be careful of that. That could lead to some challenges, especially with the Moon moving through Aries here, as we don't want to get to the point where we're burning every bridge that we have as we move through these challenging times. On the 3rd, Mercury is going to be moving into Aries. You can see that here. Okay, so this is where Mercury is going to be improving its dignity. It is going to be coming out of the watery place of Pisces. We might start to think more clearly, albeit slightly more impulsively. This may be where we're just tired of trying to find peace and love, and we're ready to to fight the empire. You know what I mean? Like this could be that moment, or we have thoughts about that or questions about that. I will say be careful about being impulsive because Mercury will be stationing retrograde shortly after this ingress. That would bring us to the first quarter moon at 16 degrees of Gemini on the 6th. So this is the first quarter of this lunation cycle, and we are seeing here. Let's get it here too. So this is something where we may have to parse through competing narratives, stories, pathways to bring something into existence. Now, the sun is in the second 10-degree section of Pisces, which we talked earlier about being a very good decan for bridging our dream and its creation into reality. The challenge with that decan is potentially overestimating our ability, having a naive optimism, something like that. So I guess I would be careful of having too much of a Pollyanna type of experience about what is or is not possible, especially because you may be wanting to expand or spread yourself slightly too thin in that process. I think that when we're facing the types of challenges that we're facing, everybody can do their part. Everybody can play a role, but you don't necessarily have to do everything. That's the great way to have burnout. This is part of how this transition into fascism works, is that they will flood the waters with all sorts of bullshit, and not all of it is going to stick. That people are going to push back on things, but they're trying to overwhelm you to the point where you give up. So pick a few things that you're interested in or that are important to you, and then focus on that and helping to make change with that. I think that's good advice for this first quarter moon. On the 8th, we have the sun trining Mars. So this is something where we may understand what types of actions that we need to take to bring about to bridge the gap between our dream and our reality. And we may be weeding out some of the challenges to our sense of peace and security as well. That decan that Mars is moving through direct at this point is the walled garden. So a great time to identify how to protect the people that are most important to you, potentially, with this trine to Mars on the 8th. Then we have our first void of course for the month on the 10th through the 13th. Again, this is when the moon is going to be making an aspect to a specific planet. In this case, I think the last aspect it's going to make on the 10th is a sextile with Jupiter. And then it's going to be void all the way until it makes the square with Jupiter in Virgo. So this is something where it would behoove us, I think, to slow down, to release some of our expectations around things working out exactly how we plan them. My best recommendation for this period of time and subsequent period of times is this is a great time for reflection. It's a great time for cleaning a space. It's a great time for decluttering, whether it's your mind or your physical space, and taking it easy a little bit. I think that we will need breaks and rest periods as we move forward into this timeline. And these void of course moons, I think, are good ones to say, you know what, I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to take a little recharge during these void of course moons. Mercury conjuncts Venus retrograde on the 11th. So here you can see here Venus conjoining Mercury. I think that this is an interesting one, specifically because this decan talks about being able to sever and separate. And that may be very attractive during Venus retrograde, especially in Aries. We may be very attracted to independent action, personal sovereignty, severing from something, whether it's a relationship or a society or something of that nature. When Mercury comes together with it, there's probably a lot of discussion about it. Discussion about leaving something behind, discussion about what we're angry about, what we're frustrated with, how we want to become warriors and warrior goddesses, which is, what Venus is, the role that they might be taking on in this particular guise. Although I will say this, Venus is still in the evening star phase, and generally she's more of a warrior in her morning star phase when she rises before the sun. So something to consider. But I do think questions about independence and our own personal sovereignty will be coming up during this period of time. And then that gets us to Saturn Cazimi on the 12th. It's a big day. This is 22 degrees of Pisces, Saturn being renewed in the heart of the sun. I think there's going to be a lot of big picture events happening in March, where we're going to see what sacrifices we are going to need to make to move things in a positive direction. So Saturn binds us to things. Saturn is binding us with its conjunction with the sun to a cycle of potential sacrifice for our beliefs. And I don't know exactly what that will look like. There's all sorts of ways we can sacrifice for our beliefs. It could be through, getting involved with our local communities, with our neighborhoods. Could be through political action, through protest. Could be through boycott of large corporations. It could be through, speaking out about oligarchy and the billionaire class, so things of that nature. It could be sacrifices through having to change our lifestyles a little bit to adapt to some of that. Like, I think that one of the things, there's been a lot of articles I've been reading about fast fashion and, using things like Amazon and how convenient those things are. And a lot of people use it because it's affordable and they want to be able to get cheap delivery and things of that nature. I'm not immune to some of these desires as well, but we may have to make sacrifices and live with less potentially, but also change the way we purchase things, our habits. Maybe instead of buying a new set of shirts every month, maybe we just go to the thrift store and buy a high quality shirt every few months. Do you see what I'm saying? Like reusing something. Those are sacrifices, but in service of an ideal, in service of disconnecting from that which is harming others. It's not necessarily about making yourself suffer. It's about doing something that won't perpetuate other people's suffering. And if you need to be more ascetic, giving up something to do that, then so be it. It doesn't necessarily just have to be giving up, though. You could advocate for fair distribution of resources. If people are advocating for a change to minimum wage or advocating for some of the social safety net programs that are on the chopping block, those types of things, you can make sacrifices for that. Like there's all sorts of different ways and different roles and different facets to it. But I do think it's going to be there's going to be downloads, and I would encourage you to look at both your Capricorn and Aquarius houses to see how the Saturn Cazimi could be affecting different topics in your life. So in this very arbitrary Virgo rising chart, there's a Saturn Cazimi in the 7th house, and it will have an impact on the 5th and the 6th. So a relationship realization. This is probably for Khadija here. Khadija stops in. She's getting a Virgo rising reading. Her relationship realizations could affect if she has children or creative projects and the work that she does. Like maybe there's a discussion that Khadija is having with her partner if she has kids about who takes responsibility and who has to do the grinding work of taking them somewhere or helping them to do all sorts of things. So that's one example of how we can integrate a Saturn Cazimi in one house and how it spills out and affects other things. So Khadija, you'll have to confirm or deny if anything's going on like that. But yeah, interesting. Okay, so that's our Cazimi. of Saturn. Yeah. Khadija says it really is for me. My ascendant is 26 Virgo. Khadija, are you having any discussions like that, like redistribution of responsibilities, maybe even with your partner, related to either your creativity or your children? I mean, if you're not, you might be having those discussions soon, potentially. Okay. What else do we have here? Just a couple more things. So on the 13th through the 14th, we have Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde going under the beams of the sun. Okay. So, well, actually, let me change this here. So before Mercury goes retrograde, it goes under the beams. So technically, if I want to be accurate, Mercury would be direct going under the beams of the sun, and Venus would retrograde under the beams. But this is interesting too. Another moment of phasis, another moment where we may be turning inward to find our inner truth rather than relying on externalized feedback potentially. Both of these planets are going to be renewed in the heart of the sun in their Kazimis over the course of the next month. And it can be a little bit destabilizing. Our relationships could have some challenges and some reconsiderations along with them, and our communications. I would encourage you at this point, though. My hope is that with all the Aries stuff, that yes, you may want to start off on a new path, maybe even an independent one, but I would take your time with those decisions. It's much easier to slightly delay a decision and to make a better one because you've reflected over it, rather than to just burn a bridge completely that is difficult to come back from. And this is the type of energy with Mercury, Venus, and Aries where it's easy to just like take flamethrower to something and create collateral damage. That is one of the things that the Deccan material talks about with Aries 1 in particular. Is it's like a battle axe that's just going around, swinging around. And unlike a Scorpio, like Mars, etc., it will be very precise, like a scalpel, Mars's energy. But in Aries, it's just like wielding this, like just this flamethrower. And yes, there might be some things that needed to go, but there are going to be some things that you shouldn't be cutting, that are collateral damage. And we've seen this in the way that Musk is going through the government. There's things that are cut that they're not even meaning to cut through just indiscriminate action. Things like, oh man, just things that make the basic functioning parts of the government. Khadija says, I've been having a back and forth with my partner about how to divide duties and tasks concerning my work project and my project to restructure my day-to-day routine. Well, there you go, right? There you go. And maybe that'll help to free up more creativity time for you, Khadija, right? Bringing in the topic of the fifth house as well. So yeah, that's astrology is really cool like that, especially Hellenistic astrology, traditional astrology, where we're looking at those guest host relationships between different topics in our life. So I wish you all the luck with that, friend, and I hope that you're able to have fruitful conversations. Just, I would recommend, try not to get too fired up about it. Assume positive intent with each other. That can be a good way to get through this type of thing. All right. That brings us to our full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo 3 on your ascendant, Khadija. This is the Khadija show today. So this will be the start of eclipse season, and we have some, let's see, I've got some comments I want to get to before I get to that. Let's see. Tarya T is here. We got all the Taryas stopping in. Hello from Helsinki, Finland. Just popping in. Say hello. Watch the replay later. Thank you, Tarya T. Appreciate you. Moi, my friend. And I hope that you're having a great afternoon and over there in Finland. One of my favorite places. I would like to visit there sometime. I've really connected with some nice folks over there. Karen says Saturn Kazemi is right on my IC. Oh my goodness. So maybe some new restructuring around your home life or with your family potentially. Tracy says, thanks, Spencer. Yes, it is. What is ours and what is not ours. I am a hermit crab. Devices do tap us in. That is so helpful. Thank you. I had to put you on hold for a while to do a car run. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, definitely with like our phones and things of that nature, it can suck us in really easily. So how do we take back control of that, right? So that we're not feeling like that we're just always interrupted. Like it's hard to concentrate on something when, you are engaging with a new crisis every 3 minutes on your phone or however much you pick it up. Don says, I wish they'd eliminate income tax like Trump talked about years ago. 10% flat tax would be so much more efficient, easy. Just take it and leave me alone. Don, I don't have enough information or tax knowledge to understand if that would be a good thing or not. I do think that taxes help create things like roads and programs that help people that need help. So I think that just eliminating tax completely isn't the way to go. But as long as the billionaire class is taxed the same or their fair share as the rest of us, then you could structure it however you want. Khadija says there's been a bunch of confusion on what each of us is asking for and what we can do. I think it's Neptune conjoined my descendant. Yeah, that would definitely be something that would do that, I'm sure. Let's see. Khadija says, thanks for the feedback, Spencer. I'll definitely try to take your advice after rewatching the video. Happy to be of service, my friend. Don says, for sure they do, and I don't mind that. It's the loopholes for the big businesses that kill me. I agree with that, Don. I agree with that. I think that's what a lot of people are saying right now is how do we just have a fair system? And right now it isn't fair. And all of the dismantling that you're seeing in the government is to make it easier for that billionaire big business class to exploit the system and steal from the working class, literally steal our tax dollars. So don't for 1 minute think that they're trying to actually like create efficiency, quote unquote. They're literally, this is a wealth grab by the very, very top, 0.00%, 1% or whatever it is. And that to me is very sad and is going to hurt a lot of people. So this full moon lunar eclipse in Virgo 3 is at 23 degrees of Virgo, and I will do a full live stream with it. But I will say this. Let's go to the eclipse itself. 23 degrees Virgo is on a fixed star called Alkes, and that is a fixed star in the constellation Crater, the Cup. And Crater is a series of, it's a constellation that is near two other ones, one being Corvus the Crow, the other being Hydra the Sea Serpent. And the way that basically shakes out the story between the three is that the Crow was given a divine mission by Apollo to fill this cup with sacred stuff, ambrosia. And the Crow got distracted from that sacred mission by shiny things. And there's a fixed star called Algorab at 13 degrees of Libra that talks about distractions of Corvus the Crow. And then Corvus the Crow, instead of taking responsibility for that distraction, blames his failure to complete his sacred task on Hydra the Snake. So there's a whole narrative that's playing out there where we have a sacred mission that we're trying to enact and carry out at 23 Virgo. What legacy do we want to pass on? I've talked to a lot of Virgo 3s that are very concerned about the legacy that they want to pass on to the next generation. We have to be careful that we don't get distracted by all of the noise that we've just been talking about on our phones and the news, all of the things that are designed to turn us against each other, all that stuff. That's all noise, right? Because we have an important task right now. We have an important task to figure out how to maintain our sanity and maintain our freedom and our independence and our country and our union, I guess, at least from an American perspective. And from a global perspective, we have a lot of sacred tasks right now as far as, making sure that the planet is healthy, making sure that people have enough to eat, that have shelter, food, etc. All of those things are sacred missions. And again, some of the tools of authoritarianism is distraction and trying to make you afraid and trying to pit you against each other. I will say this louder for the people in the back. They're trying to take a war of culture, a culture war, trying to create a culture war and create enemies that don't exist to distract from the class war. It's that simple. It doesn't get any simpler than that. They're trying to other and create an enemy for people to rail against so that they can distract from their wealth grab. And you can stop them from doing that by not buying into all of the noise, by not buying into the othering that they are trying to create out of thin air. It takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of focus. And I think but it's important work. Sometimes you might have to disconnect from the streams of information that create the othering, the anxiety, and the division. And you may have to reconnect with your local communities. You have to reconnect with your neighbors. You have to reconnect with real people. I had a nice conversation with my neighbor the other day. I was going on a walk, and we just talked about real things, and it's very grounding to do so. Like he's rebuilding his garage after a garage fire, and we talked about all those things and talked about how he's doing in his life and all those kind of normal things that you talk about with people that are right in your backyard. That's a great way to ground, is to get to know the people around you, rather than just seeing other people as an ideal. Let's see. Dawn says, I think some of it is to help the government be more efficient too and run more like a business. I can't run my home. Can't run my home in a deficit. Our government is run. Well, Don, we might have to agree to disagree on some of that. I think that there's definitely inefficiencies in government. It's hard to please everyone. And I think that there is a lot of, there's definitely bloat, but there's a lot of things in a government that helps a lot of people, even if it doesn't necessarily help you personally. It may be helping other people, and it may be helping to create a stable environment. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't have my political discourse, hat on today as far as how to find the perfect solution. I don't know if it exists. But I think that there is a happy medium between fiscal responsibility that many people on the traditional Republicans like, and I say traditional Republicans because what we have going on now is not that. These are fascists. We have fascists that are in power right now. They're not traditional Republicans. And people are more liberal who are trying to support social programs and things of that nature. We're all Americans, is what I will say. At least you and I are. There's international people that are listening to this. They're like, "What's going on with Americans?" You know what I mean? I think that there has to be some structures. There's a reason why people pay taxes. It's so that we can have things like roads. It's so that we can have things like Social Security, so that the most vulnerable in our populations don't get cast aside. So again, if I had all the answers, I'd probably be running for office, but I definitely don't. But I do think that the way that it's happening right now is insanity. As far as the cuts that are being made, it's indiscriminate. It's not being done in any organized fashion at all. It's being done with a machete, and that to me is very, very, very dangerous. KP says, this eclipse is on my midheaven. Very anxious. Yeah, I could see that. It's a lot happening for sure, friend. Well, we'll try to give you some context with the I-Ching and the animal for you. And we will have another live stream as well about the eclipse. Don says, for sure, we need to stop sending money elsewhere and use it here. Just saying trillions of dollars. And I'd have to declare bankruptcy. Banks certainly won't loan me more money to spend. Don, respectfully, that's actually a very limited way of viewing how the government works. I think that there is, again, and I'm not an expert in this, so some of this I'll probably be talking out of my ass. What I will say is that we don't just live on a country, in a country, we live on a planet. And our actions have an effect on people in other countries, many of which are listening here today, Dawn. And they're watching very closely to see what we are going to do. Are we going to use the full might of our military to acquire more resources and more countries and in manifest destiny in just a land and wealth grab? Because that's the direction we're heading right now, Dawn. Are we going to continue to help other countries with aid, like providing medical resources and whatnot for countries that are suffering with AIDS epidemics and things of that nature? Which I will tell you, that program just got cut. Are we going to continue to exploit people in the Southern Hemisphere so that we can basically become wealthy off of the backs of their basic slave labor to enjoy our comfortable lifestyles moving forward? We've been doing that for 200 years. And instead of starting to think about things in a global perspective and the consequences of our actions on other people that are less fortunate than us, now we're saying that, well, we don't have enough. I disagree with that very strongly, Don. We have plenty. We have a lot. And we got it. Most of it was ill-gotten. So I just am going to push back as firmly but gently as I can on some of this thinking. And I think that this is going to be a really important discussion that we have to have moving forward. And what I will say about this, though, Dawn, is that much of these things are relative. It can feel like we don't have a lot compared to other people that we see even in our own communities. It can feel like we're suffering when we're struggling to pay bills and work within the system that was given to us. That, to me, is the difficult part. For example, the system that's given to us here, Dawn, is capitalism, and as we move further and further into the exploitive nature of capitalism, people are being asked to do more and more things that do not necessarily feel ethical to them. And I'm speaking from a personal experience. Like, I'm not a wealthy person. And part of that is because I just refuse to do some of the things that late stage capitalism requires of us to exploit other people. Now, does that mean that by living in the system that my hands are completely clean? No, it doesn't. And that sucks and it hurts. But I do think that there are, as Americans, Don, you and I have to take a good hard look in the mirror and start to feel gratitude for the things that we do have. And I think that the real truth of this Pisces moon and of the Pisces stellium and of Pisces in general is that mycelial network. We aren't just this island out in the middle of the ocean. All of the wealth that we have comes from not just here. It comes from relationships that we have either created or exploited with other people in other countries. Like this is the thing that I don't understand about the isolationist viewpoint that many Americans have. We didn't get to where we're at just from our own efforts. We got to where we're at through some of those efforts, but some things that were negative, as far as like exploiting other people, other country. I mean, just think about the people that were here first, Dawn, the indigenous people of America, and the exploitation of and the eradication of most of their culture and communities to be able to I don't know, create whatever this is that we're living now. That alone is something to reckon with. And I understand that in a place like Alabama, that this type of viewpoint is harder to get on board with. I'm sure that the noise in Alabama is loud for the types of things that the billionaire class is promoting, which is unfortunate because Alabama is actually probably one of the states that suffers the most from wealth inequality. I will say this, Don. I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful that we can, I think, potentially have a conversation like this on the channel respectfully. And just because we may not completely see eye to eye right now doesn't mean that we can't come and bridge that gap through asking questions and not necessarily making assumptions of one another. So I hope for everyone here today that you and I can model love and respect for one another while also challenging our preconceived notions about what our reality is. And I think that's important. We have to be able to do that to get through this together as a union. Do you know what I'm saying? As a community, as a global community, not just as one country and one state to another. I really believe in the global mindset, because one truth that you learn is that our actions do affect other countries. Other countries do affect us. There is nobody that is on an island. I learned this the hard way, Dawn. Like I had an American isolationist ideal at one point where I wanted to go off the grid and buy a farm, 5 acres worth of land in southern Michigan, and just check out because I just didn't feel like I agreed with the system. And eventually, I've told this story before, but eventually we discovered that the water table was polluted and that the previous owners had died of cancer from drinking water from a bunch of VOC paint chemicals that had been dumped in the water table a mile up the road. And that was a big realization moment for me, Don, where I realized that, we're all connected, that there's nowhere to escape to. And the actions that we have there's so much. This is why global, like climate change and globalness is important, because the actions of every single developed nation is affecting other developed nations, etc. And the more that we are attached to this bloated lifestyle, the quicker we are going to accelerate our demise as a species. And if that doesn't wake us up to try to put our differences aside and start cooperating with one another, I don't know what will. Like how to run the government, how to distribute tax dollars is all very insignificant compared to how do we keep this planet habitable. Like, I don't know. Don says, I feel that, and I totally agree we should help where we can, but we can't keep printing money that has no value. We're killing ourselves too. Sure. I mean, sure. Says, nope, and I think we should carpool, and we can too, and stop giving oilmen all their money. No one seems willing to be bigger. Okay, definitely. There's common ground that we can have here, for sure. Khadija says, I'm majoring in political science, and I appreciate how you're describing these issues. The U.S. has been Victim to anti-intellectualism movement that encourages conflating unrelated issues. There you go. I like that, Khadija. Absolutely. Seek Raj says, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Spencer. Thank you for your being courageous and calling it out. Well, this is part of my experience just from connecting with people from other countries. This is the thing that we have to I would encourage all of you to make friends with someone in another country. Raj and I have a relationship. Like we talk to one another multiple times. We talk about issues in our own countries and how each other's countries affect each other. I talk to people from Finland. I talk to people from Germany. I'm talking to all of you right now. This is how you eliminate the assumptions that you have about how things should be, is you actually talk and have a conversation, because we might learn something from one another. If all we're doing is tapping into the propaganda machine that we've learned from being very young in whatever respective country that we came up in, America in particular, we won't have these relationships with people outside of our little bubble. And that's really sad, because look at the beauty of diversity that we have, of different ways of viewing the world and of interacting with it. That's another thing we can do with the Pisces new moon, is appreciate different perspectives, appreciate that we are trying to move towards that everybody deserves peace and food and shelter and resources, not just Americans. I'm going to bang the table for that. Everybody deserves it. And until everybody has it, none of us are free. Khadija says, unrelated issues like how a household's budget and how a country's budget are fundamentally different in terms of goals and mission, longevity of the task, and the types of responsibilities therein. Sure, yes. I'm going to, wow, we got a lot of comments on here. I'm going to give people a voice on here, but then I'm going to try to steer it back to our topics. These are important topics. We have to contextualize it with the astrology if we can. We have to assume positive intent with one another. Man, Mars, here's an example of electing a chart to do a live stream. Mars is in the first house right now, but where's Mars right now as far as yeah, it's still in the first. We've been having sort of martial experiences lately, which maybe we need to have them. Maybe that's okay. I think a lot of emotions are valid, not just peaceful emotions. Sometimes we have to have like some things that are uncomfortable, but how do we do it in a way that's still respectful? And hopefully that's what we're doing here today. Don says, I'm very grateful to live in America and that I have a house to live in today. I certainly didn't when I was a kid. Absolutely. And I'm grateful that you have a home, and I'm grateful that you have that peace and security. You know, there is extreme poverty in America. You know, there's extreme poverty in other countries. And a lot of it's relative. And this is the thing. The argument that we're making today, Dawn, is, I hope, one that will help people who are just trying to live regular lives. And I'm all for fiscal responsibility and for keeping your own household in shape, in good shape. But like Khadija was saying, the way that we run a government financially is very, very different to the way that we run a household financially. And I'm not a political science major, and I'd have to go and do the same amount of detailed research that I do for these astrology podcasts to be able to make a well-reasoned argument for that. And I'm not prepared to do that today, because there are things that I would forget, and there are things that I wouldn't be able to describe in clarity So I will leave it to maybe some of you in the chat here, but I think that we'll have to table that one for now. Paintings by Maris says scarcity mentality has been used to manipulate people. It's sad. Yeah, I agree. Corey says, I also went to school for poli-sci, and you're spot on. Yes. The ridiculous spending was approved by Congress as the Constitution dictates because that's how the government works. Yes, that is interesting to me too. This is something that we have to keep in mind. The way that the American government works, and this is not a civics class, but from my very limited understanding of civics, we have 3 branches of the government. One is called the executive branch, one is called the legislative branch, and one is the judicial branch. And yes, spending is approved by the legislative branch, which is Congress, not the executive branch, which is the president. So the reason why those things are separate is a concept called checks and balances, so that one particular person does not get excessive power. And all of those things have been thrown out the door in the last few weeks. All of those checks and balances have been, because here's who Congress is. Congress is you. You voted for the congressional members. They represent different districts. They represent different communities. And they vote on how our collective resources should be distributed. That's what Congress does. So again, I have not necessarily the language to describe this in as great a detail as I would like, but I like a lot of the points that are being made. Don says, I feel that I also think that some may be looking to have arguments just to argue, and that's okay. Well, Venus is in Aries right now, so I'm not a small-minded redneck as it seems I'm being viewed. I am not liked because I am a liberal. No, I don't think you're a small-minded redneck, Don. And I think that that's a narrative that and a label that you put on yourself, not me. I've always found you to be very intelligent, and you've had really nice comments on our live streams. I think we may just have a slightly different perspective on how government spending works, and that's okay. It honestly is. In the past, we were able to have these discourses like we're having peacefully. We were able to make points and counterpoints without it devolving into name calling or anything like that. Like, I didn't call you any names, and I don't intend to, you know? Like, you're a valued part of our community, and we can have an impassioned discussion about these things and still be friends at the end of it. At least I hope so. You know, my favorite phrase is well, let's agree to disagree. And let me go get some more information about that, you know? So hopefully we're modeling that today. And Dawn, you're doing fine, you know? You aren't descending into name calling or finger pointing. You're just expressing your opinion. And your opinion is something you are entitled to have, just as mine is, and just as Corey's is, and Khadijah's is, all of those things. So hopefully we can continue to model that moving forward as a nation, while gently pushing back on each other when we need to help one another. Khadijah says, there isn't enough space to have an impactful and productive conversation about deep misunderstandings like this, but I wish we had a formal space to chat political topics in the astro and spiritual community. Yeah. I don't know where those spaces exist, Khadijah. That would be nice. I mean, I'm sure that they do. There are definitely astrologers out there that focus more on politics than I do on my channel. I try to stay abreast of political information while also making it digestible for people in their everyday lives. I was thinking about this today, Khadijah. This is a great point. Just thinking about astrology. I was thinking about how to approach this today, and when things are fairly calm or peaceful, it's a lot easier to focus on our everyday lives and just like, how do we become centered as an individual? How do we take our kids to soccer practice or whatever it is, and all of those issues. When events become as impactful collectively as they are now, it's almost impossible to ignore the collective impact. And not that we were ignoring it in the past, but things weren't happening so fast that we were trying to parse it out in real time. I mean, we are at a huge inflection point astrologically with not one, but 3 outer planets changing signs within a few year period. Pluto moving into Aquarius, Neptune moving into Aries, and Uranus moving into Gemini later this year. Society, the fabric of society is changing rapidly, and not addressing it would be somewhat negligent. Now, how do we just to talk about it in ways that are productive? I don't know. I'm not an expert in political discourse, but hopefully today we've at least started the conversation. Khadija says, like this meaning a live chat has such character limits. Yeah, I think so too. And the other thing that we don't get in a space like this is we don't get inflection. You'll get my inflection. You'll get my emotions, which I have to do a good job of like maintaining my own emotional center. But we don't get Dawn's inflections. We don't get Dawn's tone. We don't get Khadija's tone or Corey's tone. So there's limitations to having these conversations in these spaces. But it's interesting to see what we've got. Corey says, for as long as I've been alive, 1992, well, you're young Corey, Chinese monkey, right? The year of the monkey. I'm a 1980 monkey. Republican presidents have been the single biggest contributor to our national deficit via egregious tax cuts and corporate welfare. I agree with that. But I think that there's the real truth of the matter, Corey, from where I'm sitting, is that there's not a whole lot of difference between the two political parties at this point. Like, they're both kind of taking actions that are in service of the billionaire class. We thought we had these two parties that were, working in the interest of liberal, in Republican, etc., conservatives. But from a global perspective, both of these parties are so far to the right that a lot of people they're looking at our country and they're not seeing the big division in Republican and Democrat that we are here. And this is the arguments that we're making today that I will hopefully try to steer us away from at some point, is that this isn't necessarily a Republican or a Democrat issue at this point. This is an oligarch versus working class people issue. And I don't know how many times I have to say that. Like, the argument that I'm making hopefully is in support of people like Dawn. Even Dawn says that she's liberal, but I don't know what that means. She'll have to describe what that means to her, right? Like, there could be someone who's listening today who identifies as a Republican, but is part of the working class. And the actions that are happening right now are not in support of the working class. They're in support of the billionaire class. That's it. It's as simple as that. And yes, I know it's more nuanced than that, but that's the big picture. Corey says, as a native Mars in Cancer near the degree at which it's stationing, oh boy, rabble rouser. Khadija says, just so everyone knows, I have respect for everyone here and y'all's point of view, and I'm assuming good intention and ethics. I appreciate that, Khadija, and that's the type of environment that I'm trying to foster here today. Rachel Fletcher is here, says hello, joining late from Roanoke, Virginia. Well, Rachel, you've stepped into a passionate political discussion, but it's been respectful, and we've been trying to see things from many different viewpoints, and I think that's a good thing to do. Autumn moonlight. Moon is not in Libra. Oh, I thought it is. Yeah, the moon right now, as we're recording this, is in Sagittarius. but the new moon is in Pisces on the February 27th. Khadija says, I'm also from the South, Dawn. I'm a Louisiana liberal, so I feel for you sincerely. I've enjoyed this exchange. Thank you. Oh, good. Yeah, and this is the thing. I think that, yeah, Dawn says, I am considered a liberal here and I identify as libertarian. Yeah, I mean, there's a spectrum to all this. And I'm so glad that there is a diversity of people here today. We've got people from the UK, we've got people from Finland, we've got people from the South, we've got people from the West Coast. We all need to be having this conversation together. You know what I'm saying? That's what we're doing here. We're conversing with one another. Dawn is, whether you're a libertarian, a liberal, a conservative, whatever, I'm assuming that you're not a billionaire. And I'm assuming that we don't have any, do we have any billionaires in the audience today? If you're a billionaire, put it in the chat and then hit that $ in the chat and make a contribution because you can afford it. Like, but I don't think that's going to happen because none of us here are of the billionaire class. Everyone here is probably considered working and or middle class, which is basically the working class. And yes, some of us may have slightly more than the other, but we're talking about magnitudes of exponential number differences between the people that we're punching up towards today. So, Dawn, what I will say is that I'm doing my best to advocate for you through my own perspective. And I think you are doing your best to advocate for me through your perspective. And that's pretty cool. You know, that's pretty cool that we're able to do that for each other. Corey says we're all entitled to an opinion, and we're also entitled to eradicate disinformation. Amen to that, Corey. I agree. I love that. Devin is here. Devin says, I back you on that, Spencer. Working class and ecological community unite. Yes. I think that everyone here, I think hopefully we've weeded out anyone who is an actual fascist on this channel through just being kind to one another, you know? And I think everyone here has at least some kind of ecological awareness, you know, has a somewhat of a kind heart that cares about other people. And all of these things are kind of wrapped up in one another. Corey says, libertarian and liberal, as much as I hate to break it to you, are near antonyms. Yeah, Don says, I'm not a billionaire by far. We have a conservation farm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and to Corey's argument, liberal and libertarian are definitely different things. So I don't know if we have time to break all that down here today. Corey says, well, I agree. I think our discourse right now would be starkly different under President Harris. Well, I think you're right, but we'll see. Paintings by Mayor says, if I was a billionaire, I would pay my fair share and then some. All right, Mayor. Well, then we're on the right track. Rachel says, I haven't even met a billionaire in person. Most of us haven't because they don't mingle with the working class very often. Oh, man. Yeah, just one clarification and then we'll move forward with this and move on. Liberal versus libertarian. That's an interesting one. I have a feeling, and I don't want to butcher this because, again, I'm not a poli-sci major, but liberal tends to mean, from what I consider, someone who supports more social programs in the government and having the government take care of those things. Libertarian, from what I understand, is that, and I have to choose my words carefully because I don't have a great way of describing this. For me, what libertarian means is they want less government involvement and more freedom, right? Yeah, I don't know. I think that my pushback on that is that there are just certain things that we need to pay for that we all use, like roads, like organizations that keep our water clean to drink. If you're a farmer, okay, like Don, if you're a farmer, what kind of government subsidies do you get from the government to help you farm? You know, like from my understanding, the government subsidies for farming in America is quite a bit. You know, a lot of these farms couldn't function without government subsidies, right? So there are different things that governments function with, and we can go on and back and forth about what the government should be or shouldn't be. Um, but yes, much less government involvement, and that you're entitled to that opinion. Sometimes there are things where the government should be involved in, and sometimes there shouldn't be. Oh, bird conservation. I get zero government subsidies. We do bird conservation, birds from all over that are going extinct. Well, then here's what I will say. This is part of the discourse that we have here today. How do we understand each other through getting more facts about what we're actually having a discourse over? I think bird conservation is an excellent thing to do. Here is one role that the government could have in bird conservation. It could be that through the government creating regulations for certain corporations not to put things like DDT into the water supply, we have been able to restore the population of eagles in America from the brink of extinction. Okay, so back in the 70s, so this is something that you should be researching if you haven't already. Back in the 70s, they put this chemical DDT on crops that was making the shells of birds, eggs, very thin, and especially birds like eagles, big raptors. And their numbers were dwindling because this chemical was unregulated. So when we have things like government agencies, like the Environmental Protection Agency, which is being gutted right now, okay, those types of things go completely unchecked. And if you think that these big corporations are going to like do what is right versus what is for profit, then that is where we're going to have a disagreement that is a bridge that we're not going to be able to traverse very easily. But yeah. Okay. So that was a very interesting political discourse. Again, I hope that we have somewhat modeled trying to discuss these issues with one another respectfully. But I know that the times are spicy right now, and sometimes we can misunderstand each other. And I think that assuming positive intent is very important. I did want to show you something that has been on my mind for this new moon in Pisces, and that is the 4 agreements. We've been talking about shifting, and Dawn, I don't have any. I respectfully, we don't have we don't have any more time to kind of go back and forth about this. We need to kind of get back on track here. But I appreciate you, Dawn, and I appreciate that you are part of our community, and I will continue to advocate for you and for your, not only your freedom, but for your prosperity in the best way that I know how. And I hope that you will offer the same to me as well. So this is an interesting thing that I think is important for the new moon in Pisces. What we're demonstrating today through this interesting live stream is I think we are attempting to dismantle narrative loops through asking questions. So the 4 agreements is something, it's a book by a Toltec shaman named Don Miguel Ruiz. And I think it's really applicable to this new moon. Number one, he says, be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. Hopefully we try to do that here on the channel, even if we disagree. Being able to disagree about something without descending into name calling or questioning other people's intelligence, which nobody did here. Like, I will say that. It's really important. And how do we move towards finding the bridge consensus? Number two, don't take anything personally. The conversation that we had on the channel today was about a philosophical issue that does affect us personally. But when we're talking about ideals, sometimes we have to separate out criticism of the ideal versus criticism of the person, right? Don Miguel Ruiz says, nothing that others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality and their own dream, right? So we're dealing with a sign that is very much about how do we shape our reality with through our belief system. And we have to have some agreement on this, or we won't have a society, right? We won't have a functional society. We have to have at least some overlap with our dream that we're co-creating together. When you're immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering, right? So if we don't necessarily take things personally and we see things from a perspective that everyone is living their own dream, that will be helpful. Number three, don't make assumptions. And that's been our keyword for today. Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstanding, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. I truly believe in this part of the things. Part of this, new moon, part of this astrological climate, especially as we move into the Venus, Mercury, Aries season with the retrogrades. If you make assumptions about how someone feels about you or how someone feels about expressing their opinion, that can be very challenging. Now, I think there were a few assumptions that were made here today on the channel and in the chat that weren't the intention. By pushing back on a specific political stance, that doesn't take things from, I don't necessarily agree with how you want to distribute resources within the government, doesn't necessarily mean that someone thinks that you're stupid, right? I think those are leaps that we have to avoid making when we have discourses. So ask questions, right? Share your perspective, but then allow other people to share their perspective and ask them questions, right? It's not just about, sharing your perspective and letting it go. Share your perspective and then ask questions. Then finally, always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstances, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. I think today we're doing the best that we can under the auspices of Mercury in Pisces, which sometimes can confuse communication. We have a retrograde Mars still. So we have an out-of-bounds retrograde Mars. So I think things can get spicy, and we can disagree and misinterpret one another's intentions pretty easily under these astrological auspices. So I think these things are very important. Okay, let's see. Devin says, astrologically, the best dignity in the sky right now is peregrine, which means the whole zodiac isn't being resourced properly. Yeah, I could see that. And we find ourselves in sticky situations. Paintings by Mare says, 4 agreements changed my life entirely. I highly recommend it. I do too. I think it's very simple wisdom that if applied properly can lead to big changes in your life. Okay. I'm just checking in with the chat. All right. So we do have an I-Ching for you. We'll just wrap this thing up with an I-Ching and an animal. So our I-Ching is number 10, which translates to treading. Conduct, circumspection, daring, treading carefully, stepping on the tiger's tail. Oh, this hexagram talks about kind of behavior and how to act and how to be careful and how to walk in another person's shoes sometimes, which we're attempting to do today. Jack Balkin, he says, the original meaning of this hexagram was probably shoes, and the ideograph is a picture of a person walking in shoes. This was eventually extended to the idea of walking cautiously, hence the proper conduct and fulfilling one's duties in the right way. Treading has a second meaning, however. It indicates not only stepping carefully, but also treading on something, and hence the notion of taking a risk, symbolized by stepping on the tail of a tiger. Here the weak and the lowly tread on the strong and the mighty, yet no harm is done because the strong take it with good humor. The trigrams tell a similar story. The upper trigram, heaven, symbolizes the father, and the lower trigram, lake, symbolizes the younger daughter. The proud father views the precocious energy of his youngest child with tolerance and affection, and hence all goes well. Now there is a changing line here. But first, he goes on to talk about an important part of tact and decorum is treating people with the respect that they deserve appropriate to their place and station. This does not mean treating people who are poor or lowly with disdain or condescension. It means respecting each person for who they are and not treating them with disrespect or discourtesy because they do not meet your standards or because they are not who you want them to be. All human beings have inherent dignity and deserve to be treated with such, no matter how young or old they are or how high or low they find themselves in society. A central theme of this hexagram is that just as all things in the universe alternate, people will inevitably rise and fall in social standing. We talked about that with the Wheel of Fortune, didn't we? So this, we go on to, it talks about good manners. The point of good manners is not putting people in their place or to make people uncomfortable. Quite the contrary. Decorum is designed to smooth social situations and bring harmony to personal interactions and to allow people to navigate difficulty and potentially unpleasant circumstances with dignity and self-respect, which I hope we've tried to model here today. The changing line says a one-eyed man is able to see, a lame man is able to walk. He treads on the tail of the tiger bites him, misfortune, like a warrior acting on behalf of his great prince. So Jack goes on to say, although a one-eyed man can see, he does not see very well. Although a lame man can walk, he is not very agile. The text suggests that you are not as well prepared for what you want to do as you think you are. Like the one-eyed man, you do not see the situation completely or clearly. Like the lame man, your abilities are not necessarily up to the task. Beware of overconfidence, which I think is important because the new moon is squaring Jupiter, right? So we could be feeling, remember we had that Sun-Jupiter square from the decan of Pisces, sometimes associated with overconfidence. Don't bite off more than you can chew. If you plunge ahead recklessly, you will meet with disaster. Nevertheless, sometimes you have to take a calculated risk with insufficient knowledge or untested abilities because of your duty or loyalty to others, or because there is simply no other alternative. Hence, the text advises that you should only take risks when you are in a position of a warrior acting on behalf of his great prince. Another changing line says, he treads on the tail of the tiger with great caution and circumspection. In the end, good fortune. When you're faced with a dangerous task, it is still possible to succeed. However, you must proceed with great caution. Use your common sense. Try to get all the intelligence you can about the situation. Remember, don't make assumptions. Maximize your resources, plan ahead, and leave nothing to chance. With the right preparation, you can tread on the tail of the tiger and escape unscathed. Yeah, so gather information. Don't make assumptions. Be cautious when if you're having debates, if you're wanting to bring up difficult topics that people have different opinions on. How do you do it from a place of centeredness? How do we keep our wits about us, even if there is a danger of being bitten? like today, we were talking about things that are very sensitive topics for people, and like sometimes we get emotional speaking about it. But how do we stay centered while we're talking about these things so that we can come to a solution and start understanding what might be helpful for everyone or for the most amount of people? So number 9 translates to small accumulation or restraint. The taming power of the small, restraint of the powerful by the weak, small farming, taking care of the little things, accumulation of small advantages, using gentleness and friendly persuasion, temporarily held back, but rain will come. So this one, it talks about like dense clouds, but no rain, right? Dense clouds, no rain from the outskirts of our western region. So this feels like this is the heaviness before a thunderstorm. This is the heaviness where we see all the ways that we're looking for liberation and looking for relief, but it just isn't quite there yet. And we have to have patience. I think that the entire unfolding of this new moon and of the month of March is going to be like where we have all of the elements that we're for change, but we've got to deal with those retrogrades. We've got to deal with all of these types of backtracking and asking questions that might not give us the satisfaction that we're looking for in that moment, and we have to be patient. So patience is something where we're not trying to force the issue, where we're trying to have harmony with one another by understanding each other in greater depth, especially when we're dealing with topics that we may disagree upon. And sometimes it's, being able to have conversations with people to find common ground. Sometimes you can have those conversations if you've built up goodwill with one another. Many of you in our community here, we've built up months or even years of goodwill with each other. And we've had positive experiences with one another to the point where we may be able to challenge one another with the foundation of care that comes behind that. And I think that that's important, is how do you, when you're going through difficult social changes, how do you build up the social capital with one another to be able to go on a journey dealing with more difficult topics? This is like when you get to know someone first before you dive into your deepest, darkest, most challenging things. Like if, let's say you meet up with a therapist, you and that therapist are going to want to get to know each other first before you start diving into the greatest traumas potentially. You build and establish trust with one another. So I think this is what this hexagram is teaching us too, is we're building and establishing trust with one another before we're moving forward. Let's see. Devin says, by wearing shoes, we lose a sensory perspective. Without shoes, you will feel the tail before stepping down. By taking on the luxury of shoes, we need to use our other senses to make sure we don't step on things we shouldn't. Ooh, I like that, Devin. Yeah, right? It's almost like there's a humility part of stripping away the luxurious shoes and maybe even a more truer experience, so that we're being stripped a lot of our comforts right now, that we took for granted. And maybe that's giving us this ability to be more sensitive to the reality of our situations. And I think that this is a good hexagram for that. Corey says, there's a documentary I watched just last night, and it was about shoes. I believe it was called Earthing, the documentary, and it's a great encapsulation of what you just said, Devin. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Let's see. Anahira is here. Says, hello from Australia. Hello, friend. This new moon conjuncts my Venus and Psyche asteroid at 9 degrees of Pisces, 12th house, while opposing my Jupiter. I'm looking forward to seeing how this one plays out. Thanks for this, Spencer. Thank you, friend. I guess I just would recommend in the 12th house, take it easy. Try not to push things too quickly. Give yourself enough space for solitude and for hearing the voice of your own inner calling while filtering out some of the more of the noise. All right. Let's talk about the animal that we have here. This one is interesting. It's the grasshopper, which I find kind of fascinating here because we've been talking about slowing down, but maybe there's a leap coming. You know, the information I have about the grasshopper talks about grasshoppers being unique individuals. 11,000 species of grasshoppers, and each has its own individual song. The males sing to the females to attract their mate. This is a sign to you that there are many different ways to achieve the same goal. So find your own unique way of doing things. Grasshopper can jump 20 times the length of its body. This means that you can't let size hold you back from making great strides in your life. Grasshoppers are small, but they can eat 16 times their weight every day. This is a warning to watch your diet so that you don't overeat or make sure you're consuming enough to maintain your health. Grasshopper appears when you're about to experience a dramatic positive change in your life. It urges you to leap at opportunities because they may have once-in-a-lifetime potential. It goes on to say a number of things about the grasshopper, but the main takeaway is that grasshopper helps you when you're stuck and you need a new approach. This could be something where you're stuck in a rut, stuck in the mundane, and it may feel like you are practicing stillness, right? Because grasshopper is very still, and then they have this dramatic leap forward. So this new moon, there may be the stillness that we have, that calm before the storm that the hexagram number 9 was teaching us before we take a large leap forward. It also encourages us to appreciate diversity. With having so many different unique individual species of grasshoppers, it shows us that we each have our own way of engaging with our own unique song and our own unique contributions to the world. So I think that there's some really great wisdom within the grasshopper here. Oh, thank you, friend. Yeah, thank you, Anahira. Okay, well, friends, I think that is what I have for you today with our animal, with our I-Ching, with our invigorating discourse on the state of American politics. Do me a huge favor, friends. First of all, just thank you for being here. Whether we agree or disagree about some of the details of the American political landscape, I appreciate the humanity within you. I appreciate your light and your voice, and I try to give as much space for that shared co-creating that I can on this channel. I will continue to do so as long as people remain respectful and kind. We can agree to disagree and have a different viewpoint as long as it's in the spirit of kindness and cooperation. So consider that moving forward as we move forward into maybe an even spicier time potentially. But just wanted to thank you for being here today and for the support that you've shown me over the last few years or whatnot. And I think we'll get through this. I know that things are very, very challenging right now for a lot of us, and there's a lot of anxiety. Some of it is very warranted. Some of it is just noise. I think that we'll have to discover the difference between those two things as we live into the answers together. So do me a favor, like and subscribe to the channel, and sign up for the newsletter if you can. Tanya and I have a webinar that we're doing on Mars on April the 12th if you want to sign up for that. I'm just having a final check-in with our chat here. KP Karen says, thank you, Spencer. Much love and appreciation. Have a peaceful weekend, everyone. I agree. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for being here. Tracy says, certainly not any billionaires in this house. We are working class here, and I am including my 2 sons, although our government has a huge goal of taking all of our money too. I mean, again, friends, all of the things that we're talking about today are in service of normal, everyday working people. And yes, we may have a slightly different perspective on how to go about helping people who need help, but I think all of us here have somewhat of a common challenge and that we're trying to overcome right now, and it's the extreme consolidation of wealth at the very top. So, and you can make an argument if that in opposition to that if you want to, but you're entitled to that. And I don't think Tracy's doing that here. I don't think Don was doing that either. I think we're all trying to just figure out how to survive in a challenging time. So Corey says, nothing but respect for all those here, especially you, Spencer. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate you. All right, friends. That's what I've got for you. Have a great weekend. Hang in there. Assume positive intent. Be kind to one another. I'm going to put this on the screen one more time. Be impeccable with your words. Speak with integrity. Speak with kindness. Try not to utilize your word against each other. I think that there are powerful forces trying to divide us right now, and don't let them. That's a great act of resistance, is keeping respect for each other. Try not to take things personally if you can. Don't make assumptions, ask questions, and always do your best. Your best is going to be different on a different day. And maybe this is the best conversation that we could have had today. And maybe it'll be better the next day, or maybe our best will be on a different level. But be kind to yourself. Try not to beat yourself up if your best isn't exactly as good as it was yesterday. All right, friends. That's what I've got for you. Have a good one, and we'll see you the next time. Peace.